Every year, the world pours more than 30 billion tons of concrete. That is enough gray rock to bury every single person on Earth under a few tons of it. Concrete holds up your school, your home, the bridge you drove over this morning, and it has done this job for over 2,000 years. The Romans built domes out of it that are still standing today. But concrete has a secret problem. It is hiding inside almost every building on the planet, and it quietly costs the world hundreds of billions of dollars a year. Here is the strange part. Scientists already built something that fixes it. A kind of concrete that bends like a pool noodle instead of snapping like a dinner plate. A kind of concrete that can seal its own cracks shut, almost like skin closing over a cut, with nobody lifting a finger. It sounds made up. It is not. And by the end of this video, you will know exactly how one of the most boring materials on Earth learned to do something that should be impossible. If you like learning about the quiet fixes engineers are building for problems most of us never even notice, stick around and hit subscribe. This channel digs up the real story behind the materials and machines that are about to change how the world gets built, and this is just the first one. The crack you cannot see. To understand why this new concrete is such a big deal, you need to know concrete's dirty little secret first. Regular concrete is amazing at handling weight that presses straight down on it. Stack a car on top of a concrete beam and it barely notices. But try to pull it or bend it, and it cracks almost right away. It has almost no stretch in it at all. Scientists have a way to measure that stretch, and regular concrete can only stretch about 1/100% before it snaps. That is basically nothing. It behaves less like a rubber band and more like a dry cracker. To fix that weakness, builders started hiding steel bars inside concrete around 100 years ago. Steel can bend and stretch, so it holds everything together whenever the concrete gets pulled or twisted. This trick worked so well that almost every bridge, tower, and parking garage on Earth still gets built this exact same way. But here is the trap nobody solved. Steel rusts, and when steel rusts, it swells up, kind of like a nail left out in the rain that gets puffy and flaky. That swelling steel pushes outward from the inside of the concrete, and cracks start forming right where nobody can see them. Rain, ocean air, and salt from icy roads sneak into those cracks and speed the rusting up even more. It turns into a cycle that cannot be stopped once it gets started, like a slow leak that only gets worse. This is exactly why bridges in cold, salty places or cities near the ocean tend to crumble decades before anyone expected. Engineers in the United States have said that repairing concrete damage this way costs the country hundreds of billions of dollars. It might be one of the most expensive problems on Earth that almost nobody talks about. For about 100 years, engineers just patched the problem instead of solving it. They coated the steel bars, painted on waterproof layers, and mixed in special chemicals. None of it stopped the rust for good. It only slowed it down a little. So a much bigger question sat there unanswered for decades. What if concrete never needed the steel to stretch in the first place? What if the concrete itself could learn to bend? To answer that, we have to go back to a university lab, not some giant tech company, where one professor decided to try something nobody else had. Concrete that bends like rubber. Back in the early 1990s, a professor named Victor Lee started asking a strange question. Instead of stuffing steel bars inside concrete to stop it from cracking, what if you changed the concrete itself so it almost never cracked in a damaging way to begin with? Here is what his team came up with. Instead of steel bars, they mixed tiny fibers into the concrete, each one thinner than a human hair, made from a stretchy kind of plastic. These fibers do not stop cracks from forming completely. Instead, they let tiny cracks form on purpose, spread out evenly across the whole surface instead of piling up in one spot. Think about the difference between a glass plate and a fishing net. Drop a glass plate and it shatters into a few big, dangerous pieces. Pull on a fishing net and it stretches because the force spreads out across hundreds of little knots instead of crushing down on one weak point. That is exactly what these fibers do inside this new concrete. Instead of one big crack ripping open like a mouth, you get hundreds of hairline cracks, each one thinner than a strand of spaghetti. Because those cracks stay so small, rain and road salt cannot easily squeeze through them to reach any steel hiding underneath. And here is the part that sounds like science fiction. Those tiny cracks can heal themselves. When rainwater touches them, leftover bits of cement inside the mix react with the water and the air. They form a hard mineral that fills the crack back in, almost like a scab closing over a cut. Give it a few rounds of rain and many of the cracks seal shut on their own. Scientists measured exactly how much this stuff can stretch before it fails. Regular concrete cracks at around 1/100% strain, remember? This new material, often nicknamed bendable concrete, can stretch 3 to 7% before it finally gives out. That is not a small upgrade. That is hundreds of times more give than the material the entire world has trusted its homes, schools, and bridges to for 2,000 years. It looks just like regular concrete sitting in a truck. It pours the same way, it even weighs a bit less. But bend a slab of it in a lab, and instead of snapping in half like a cracker, it curves, almost like a skateboard ramp, and springs back. A material behaving well inside a quiet lab is one thing. The real test was whether it could survive out in the real world, in real weather, poured by real construction crews. Put to the test. The first big real-world test happened on a bridge in Michigan, stretched across a busy highway. Engineers swapped out a section of the bridge deck for this bendable concrete instead of the regular kind. Normal ready-mix trucks poured it, the exact same trucks used on any ordinary job site. No secret factory, no special machine, just a different recipe inside the same truck. Years later, engineers went back to check on it. The regular concrete nearby had cracked the way concrete always eventually cracks. The bendable section had barely cracked at all, and the tiny hairline cracks that did show up were already healing themselves shut. Japan pushed the idea even further. Since Japan sits on some of the most dangerous earthquake zones on the planet, engineers there used bendable concrete in the walls of a 60-story building in Osaka, which became the tallest earthquake-resistant building in the country at the time. During a real earthquake, a building needs to sway without snapping, kind of like a tree bending in a storm instead of cracking like a dry twig. Regular concrete walls tend to shatter apart under that kind of shaking. The bendable version flexed instead, soaking up the shaking rather than fighting it, and it held its shape once the ground went still again. Engineers also tested it on bridges out in freezing weather where ice and road salt usually chew through concrete within just a few winters. The cracks in the bendable version stayed so small that salt and water basically could not sneak through to reach any steel hidden inside. None of this means the material is free or perfect. It usually costs about 3 times more per batch than regular concrete, mostly because of those tiny, stretchy fibers. But when engineers looked at the full lifetime cost instead of just the price on day one, this material often ended up cheaper in the long run. Fewer repairs, longer life, less concrete getting ripped out and replaced every few decades. That trade-off, paying a bit more upfront to save far more money over 50 or 100 years, is exactly why this material has quietly spread from a Michigan highway and a Japanese skyscraper into more than 10 countries, including spots across Europe, Asia, and Australia. Why isn't it everywhere yet? So if this stuff already works, if it already survived earthquakes, highway traffic, and years of brutal winters, the obvious question is why it is not sitting under every single building on your street already. The honest answer is that changing something as massive as the global concrete industry never happens overnight. Building rulebooks have to be rewritten to even allow it. Factories have to adjust their mixing lines. Construction crews have to learn a slightly different way of pouring and finishing it. That kind of change usually takes many years, even after a material has already proven itself works. There is also the price tag. Right now, 3 times the cost up front scares a lot of builders away, even when the long-term math clearly works out in their favor. It is the same reason a lot of people skip buying the more expensive light bulb that saves them money over the next 10 years. Saving money later is a much harder sell than saving money today. But the clock has already started ticking the other way. Every year, this bendable concrete spreads to one more bridge, one more tower, one more stretch of highway. Every one of those projects is a small piece of the world, quietly stepping away from a material with a hidden expiration date baked right into it. Give it another decade or two, and the strange, bendable stuff that sounds like science fiction today might just be the ordinary concrete everyone stands on tomorrow. Before you go, if this kind of thing blows your mind the way it blows mine, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. Here is a question for the comments. If concrete, one of the oldest, most boring materials on Earth, has been secretly hiding a bend and heel trick this whole time, what other everyday material do you think is hiding a fix nobody has found yet? If you like this one, check out our video on the new battery material that could change electric cars forever. It is linked right there.